here and there could be interesting, right? Because it's like, I don't know, we have like what, two different perspectives about what, like 7 to 10 years apart. I don't remember how old you are, so
It's all right. We don't need to get into that. But yeah, no, I think we've actually, and we've never chatted about that question. Um, even without the environment and the climate being the way that it is. I mean, that in and of itself is an interesting question. Like, what does it mean? Like, should I be doing anything different, right, in this kind of world?
yeah,
Knowing that the usual assumption of, I have to assume like stability in the world in order for me to make a lot of typical decisions. Like you cannot make those assumptions
yeah.
anymore. I feel like even with the financial markets, what I feel like I'm watching is like people who are players in the market just slowly coming to grips with this idea of things like US dollar dominance, man. You got to get rid of that idea, right? Like Treasury safe haven. Yeah, you gotta like rethink that, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a bunch of things, but it's I think there's still kind of a shock where a bunch of people are just like, wait, what? Like, I don't even know what to do about that, right? So.
I mean, I used to like look at the coin markets like actively every single day, but now I'm just like, this shit just tires me out.
Yeah.
Every day it's just something like whipping back and forth. And I'm just like, oh my God, this actually hurts my body.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have the same feeling and I like I keep looking at it every day. I'm just like, okay, like what's the thing I might do today? The only thing I can keep bringing myself to do is just
Mhm.
buy a little bit more gold every day.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
Um, because that just because of the asymmetric thinking, right? I have no idea. Like gold could totally pull back, right? There are people that have certainly come out now and said like, oh, it's getting really toppy, but um, because there hasn't been one of these like kind of collapse in real time of global financial system and kind of all the things that we take for granted that are part of it. We don't really have a lot of great historical benchmarks in the last, I don't know, certainly not for the last 80 years, right? About what one of these looks like.
Yeah.
So, this is one of those things where like I think gold could in principle go far higher in a very short period of time. Um,
Hmm.
you want just sort of like think about an elephant stampede, like going into an asset class, right? Even into something like gold. So
I also wonder, like, does every generation have the like same affinity to gold? Like, I don't know if like I would honestly, for me, I would never think to buy gold ever because I'm like, the fuck do I need a rock for? Like, um, maybe that's a really dumb take, right? I'm the one buying magic internet coins, so
well, to each their own, I guess, right? So it's really funny that you bring that up. I feel like generational differences actually come up between you and I particularly when we think about like investing in trends and things like this. There's a part of me that thinks like, okay, this is exactly what Bitcoin in principle is for, right? But then there's another voice in my head that says, but Bitcoin has behaved like a risk asset, not like a, risk off asset, which might be changing now, right? As we kind of observe that. We don't really know.
yeah.
So the sort of conservative curmudgeon in me is just like, well, gold has worked for thousands of years. So I know that a bunch of old guys run money, so they're gonna buy gold, right? So that's my
Mm.
only. Whereas with decentralized crypto, and actually, I'll frame this as a question. I do think decentralized finance, right, which has been for a lot of kind of bread and butter institutional money managers, is like just this thing that they're still trying to figure out. And then
Yeah.
meme coins make them think there's nothing there. I do think that there is going to be, if the global financial system is collapsing as we speak, right, and there's sort of chaos, and now everything's up for grabs, crypto certainly has a place in the new world, right? Not just CBDCs, like actual something. But a guy like me has difficulty kind of understanding, other than maybe Bitcoin, like how to express that. Whereas like old school gold, I'm like, okay, I know how to do that, right? That's pretty easy.
When you say how to express that, what does that mean?
What coins do I buy?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Uh, Depends on the risk appetite and depends on yeah. Uh I think risk appetite primarily and like what part of the world, like what part of crypto you want to invest in.
Here's my struggle. I buy gold in order for that thing to really move, like move, right? Not
Yeah.
10%, not 20%, but like 2x, 3x. You know,
Stuff would have
either
to collapse, right? Like
right, like basically like a nuclear bomb would have to go off, right? And then now I'm like, okay, maybe I'm gonna get 2x on gold, but I don't really want that, right?
yeah,
Or
yeah.
or the other choice that I have is I go like buy call options, but I don't know when that moment is, right? Like there is gonna be a moment where everyone in the world is gonna be like, holy cow, US dollar dominance, yeah, this is over. Like we don't really think of this the same way anymore. And all the like gigantic, boring pension funds run by giant committees that haven't even had meetings yet are going to be like, all right, let's just start getting rid of like a trillion or whatever it is. So,
Well, the idea behind stablecoins is so that like you can export US dollar dominance further, right? I think that's like the key like thesis and like why like the US government is like very supportive of stablecoins.
and I would say that is a very, very smart thing they're doing. It's unfortunately being coupled with a bunch of other things like a tariff war, which
Yeah.
is scaring countries from buying treasuries, and they're like, why would I need US dollars if we're not going to trade, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that particular part I thought was actually a really, really smart move, and I really like that they did that. Unfortunately, it's this other stuff that's probably gonna, take a baseball bat to the legs of the U.S. dollar, right? Like that's the part that I'm worried. But the issue I have is like, okay, man, like I can buy gold, probably go up a little bit, and one day it might go up a lot, but like probably not 2 or 3x. But your particular trade that you just mentioned, I mean, that could be a 30 to 40x, right? At least,
Yeah. That's what I'm chasing.
right? Like, I mean, that's
Like,
30 to 40x is like you that could transform like your lifestyle in
oh yeah.
principle,
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
right?
Uh,
So, I mean, so what I'm about to tell you is a true story. This past weekend, I went down to New Mexico and I tried out a sweat lodge. I don't know if you know what that is. I can explain it, but
like a sauna, but like bigger.
yeah. Okay, so I'm going to try to explain this in a very short way. So it's a Native American sort of tradition. Like certain tribes have kind of been doing it for a very long time. It's um it's not just like a sauna. Like there's a kind of spiritual component to it. So yeah, you get into this tent. It's not a tall tent. You can't even stand up. You kind of crawl into it
Yeah.
with a group of people. And then there's what's called a fire keeper, where they have a fire that's heating up these stones. They bring the stones into the tent, and they'll pour water on it. So that part is
Yeah.
like a sauna,
Mhm.
but they close the flap of the tent and it's pitch black inside. You do not see
How
anything.
many people are in the tent?
When I went, it wasn't that many. It was like 5 or 6, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like chanting and like Native American songs, obviously, which none of which I knew the words to, right? So it's an experience. It's not. I wouldn't say it's like a sauna because it's pitch black. You're in a tent. It's a small space, and the intensity of the heat is definitely kind of up there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, why am I telling you about this? Because what does this have to do with crypto? The ceremony itself, nothing, right? But the guy who was the firekeeper, we got lunch the next day because we just started chatting, and I thought we were gonna have like just a very, I don't know, like spiritual-ish kind of conversation. But when he found that I was a business school professor, the first thing he asked me was, "Did you buy Bitcoin?" Right, like a long time ago, and I was like, "What?" And then he tells me a story about one of his friends,
Mhm.
right, who bought Bitcoin early on, and then it just mooned, right, basically, and the guy ended up selling some to go buy land in Hawaii right now, and that's a smart move, right? You kind of diversify into real estate. It's a very common thing if when you have those things. So
Yeah.
but yeah, we started to have like that conversation. Like, this is strange. Like, this was not kind of where I thought this was going, right?
Yeah.
And we did eventually get to like more of the spiritual-ish stuff too. But there are people who, let me say it this way, there are very few stocks I can think of or commodities or anything that just by buying one and going heavy into it, you change your life. But there's multiple of these kind of crypto stories, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like you play that game, you hit once and you're done, right? Like
Yeah.
that asymmetry is just staggering if you think about the gains you can make.
Completely agree. I think the thing I witnessed the most is like a lot of people hit once and they're like, all right, I'm gonna hit again. And they like, you're like at 500,000, you're at a million. All right, how do I get to eight figs? And then like people start like getting completely blown up. Like I forget, so I think I was reading a thread or someone was telling me about this guy who like ran up four or five figures to like eight figures, got blown up, like blew himself up, and then like owes the IRS like seven figures. And I'm just like, dude, this is
Wow.
yeah. It's it's problematic on like the micro and macro level in terms of like just in individuals trades, right? Because it's like, okay, I turned $2,500 into $7,500. And this literally happened to me like over the weekend. I was like, do I cash out now? I was like, nah, it's probably going to keep going up. End up taking a loss of like minus 1,200. And I'm like, so like, you have that like micro trade and then that like pattern continues over for like your overall portfolio instead of like cutting positions faster, like when you're in a good profit, right? Like,
This actually reminds me of a story. I think this is like one of those urban legend stories. I think it was originally a true story, but it's widely told, I think, among traders.
uh-huh.
And the way the story goes is that there's this guy who he basically like between when the market's open, the stock market's open at like what 9:30 or whatever, between 9:30 and 10:15, let's say, uh, he was just killing it. And then from 10:15 all the way to 4 p.m., he would lose the money.
Yeah.
So he eventually talked to someone about it. He's like, I can't kind of get around this. And the person that he spoke to was just like, well, why don't you just stop at 10:15?
Yeah.
And he
Dude,
did. And then that was it. Right? Like, I mean, problem solved.
it's hard. You don't know when to leave the table. Like, what is, I guess, like, it's crazy because I think I have a larger fear of leaving the table too early than actually losing money. Like, having a, yeah, but that's a fear I need to solve for sure.
But but is your process like, I was going to use the word data driven, but what I
No.
really just mean, okay. I mean, yeah, I know I kind of knew that already, but what I mean more is that do you have like those coins at let's say 25x or 30x versus the ones that like I think you just told me a story of like 3x, but then kind of turned
Yeah.
around pretty fast.
Yeah.
The ones at 25 or 30x, how long does it take for them to do that? Do you have a sense for the timing?
It depends. Like, it depends on like how much attention is being paid to the like crypto markets. Like, uh, I mean, there was like during like the heat of it during last fall when everything was just like really starting to rip, some like stuff like this token Peanut the Squirrel went from like $1 million market cap to $2 billion in like two and a half weeks max.
Wow.
um but you have stuff going from 1 million, you have stuff going from 250K market cap to 10-20 million in a day.
Okay.
Yeah. So the other thing to be mindful of is like there are coins that are definitely like obviously like being manipulated and like, yeah, it's the ones that do well like have like a narrative that is timely, like it's happened, like it has like social attention, like the
Okay.
meme
It's
have some,
memes.
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so things that get attention are the ones that can kind of go off into the stratosphere. I
Yeah.
mean, did you ever think about kind of being more systematic in your approach with the edge that you have? Like the Vitalik story you just told me, there's not a lot of other people out there that would, I'm assuming, would be able to trace those.
No, not. Yeah.
So I'm going to make a kind of a wild assertion here. Perhaps the crypto market has individuals that would have tremendous influence if it was publicly known that they were buying into coins, right?
Oh, yeah, that absolutely happens.
Um, and so, Bryan, couldn't you just make an investment strategy where you basically identify those wallets
I would just kind of
and
copy trade them.
yeah, I mean, people do that with
Yeah.
Warren Buffett, right? It just, yeah,
Yeah. You'd have to find those wallets and you'd have to find because Vitalik's not this like people call them influencers. I call them influenzas. Um, but like there are a lot of the folks that like very publicly are calling tokens that say they do like that believe that their track record is good is just are just looking for like exit liquidity.
yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm cautious of. There, um, yeah, typically like the influencers, there's like probably one or two good accounts that might be worth following, but again, like they have a lot more capital to dispose. So like, they might do 10 trades in a week and like one hits really big, the others get nuked, but like can you play 10 rounds? Or can I play 10 rounds? I mean, like
I
maybe
see.
on a smaller scale, yes, but like uh yeah. I also like anytime I like chase after a thesis because someone else believes in it, I get incinerated.
Hmm.
Like absolutely incinerated. There's unless it like clicks in my head, I've started like not taking trades. Just because like even though like people like very like way smarter than me believe in it, I'm just like it's hard for me to stomach the price action when I don't believe in it.
Oh, that's human though, right,
Yeah.
Bryan? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've looked at something, like even more recently. So I got out of all of my. I'm not a trader by any means. I'm really, really bad at that. So I would just love to buy and hold, and ideally just hold forever, right? Because
Yeah.
I don't want to bother trying to go find something else if I can help it. If I like what I've got. So I had these three Chinese stocks. I had to get out of all of them because like this trade war is not over, right? And so I don't know where the bottom is. But day to
You don't really
day,
bottom yet.
yeah, I don't think, no, I don't think it's hard to imagine
No.
that we have for like a truly global systemic upending of the global financial and trade system. Like I can't imagine how this could be the bottom, right? If that's actually true.
You don't
So,
think it's like a Trump administration bluff? Like they're gonna back down?
even if that's true, because I had tried to think about this from so many different angles, and what I realized is that there is no strategy, no rational strategy I can think of that they could possibly have in mind that has been executed well. So in other words, either they had a good idea and they've done a pretty poor job of execution, which is
Mhm.
going to have all kinds of negative consequences because no one's ever really thought of, the US as typically being the one to bungle. Usually you think of that as like, fill in the blank emerging market country with, somebody who's kind of not totally understanding economics and kind of doing crazy stuff with the central bank kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you never think no one's ever usually thought that the U.S. would be kind of in that camp. So either it's kind of poorly, my opinion, relatively poorly executed strategy, right, independent of whether you agree with kind of the ideas or not, or just really really bad strat or like have no idea what they're doing, right? That would be the other, which is the really scary kind of version. They're both kind of scary, right? There's versions of like, didn't
Yeah.
exactly kind of do this the right way. So either way, I think that means you basically have a confidence loss in the US. I mean, Bryan, I know you're a big fan of the EU, and if you talk to your European friends or anyone outside of this country, like what do you kind of see happening? Like there is, I think there is a change in the perception of the US, like in
Yeah.
general, right? And
Yeah.
that no matter what happens next, like that's not gonna come back to the same level again.
Okay.
Um, which is why I feel pretty good about gold, regardless, right? Because a bunch of people need to dump some of their dollars, but to go into another fiat currency, I don't know, right? Some of them will do a
Yeah.
little bit of that, but
What what
that's why gold sticks out.
what fiat currency do you think people would go after the dollar?
That's a good question. This is a world I'm not well versed in because I'm usually the like, hey, I just buy stocks and I think about value kind of thing, right? Currencies and like what's expensive for a currency. I don't know, right? Like, I mean, there's like no decent pricing mechanism or model that I can think of for this stuff. So, but which fiat currency? So Swiss franc is always, I think that the Swiss franc is the much smaller kind of current safe haven. It's popped a lot
Hmm.
at the moment. But what I don't like about these things is that the Swiss central bank at some point will not accept the exchange rate being egregiously against, the Swiss franc, right? Meaning like overvalued to such an extreme that the Swiss economy can't function maybe in the way that it normally would. So they'll devalue it if they have to.
Oh, I don't think I fully understand it, but I think I'm starting to. So like if everyone's like we want Swiss francs, the what happens to that nation? Spell that out.
Oh, you're talking about the detonation of the US dollar?
Not the US, but you're saying the Swiss would try and devalue the
Yeah,
currency if it exposed
correct.
like
So this is what every central bank can do, right? Like, so Bryan, in a very simple sense, right? The US does this all the time. If there's demand for your currency for whatever reason, and your currency you feel like has just gotten too expensive, from an economic policy perspective, worst case, you just print a lot of it.
yeah.
You literally just like create it out of thin air, right?
What is an economic policy perspective? Like what does that represent? Like what would you need to see for you to be like, all right,
Yeah.
like
So, okay, I'll make up a hypothetical, which I don't think is actually going to happen, but just to kind of illustrate it. So Japan is a very export-driven economy, for example, right? Like all the
yeah.
brands that you kind of think of that are Japanese. And part of what gives them naturally a competitive advantage is that their currency is actually relatively weak, right, relative to a lot of other currencies.
Huh.
Now, let's say for some reason Japanese yen suddenly became like the safe haven currency, right? And
Yeah.
everyone's dumping their US treasuries and they start buying Japanese government bonds,
Mhm.
or just yen assets of some kind, right? Yen real estate, like Japanese real estate, all this kind of stuff. Then the yen will appreciate by definition, right? Because
Yeah.
people have to convert their currency into that. But
Mhm.
that's real bad for kind of bread and butter Japanese companies who are just living off export because domestic consumption is not enough to kind of feed these companies.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
So at the end of the day, because is the problem that they're going to be selling their goods not in yen, but in something else? Or am I,
Yeah, so the problem is that their goods become more and more expensive because basically like their cost to manufacture all these things and the prices, right? They're earning yen at the end of the
yeah,
day,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And so if it turns out that the exchange rate, like the yen, is just that strong, that means that they're earning less and less of whatever is coming in, right? Like they're not.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, but okay, but let me frame that in a different way. Like the fact that they can produce something and sell it for a certain amount of yen and for them make money, but the yen is really, really weak, let's say,
Yeah,
makes them price competitive in other countries.
I
Sorry,
see.
that was actually the correct way to phrase it. I did not phrase it exactly right the first time. Yes.
So,
Uh,
so I guess like is the idea find a country everyone's like very bullish on, like, and or is that not good enough? Like,
you can. The issue is that no place looks that great, right?
huh?
So think of this as like the historical kind of thinking, right? Think about the 2008 financial crisis or like other kind of financial crises or whatever it is, people run straight into US treasuries because that's the thing. Like everybody just kind of assumes that's going to work, right? Like I don't have to
Yeah.
worry about that, right? And the world kind of bought into that. So,
Hmm.
um, and so no other currency really, at least historically, has that kind of equal stability, right? In terms of perception. There are reasons why some people wouldn't necessarily want to own Chinese renminbi or the euro or all these things, which is why what's happening is that it's a basket of currencies that people are going into, and Swiss franc is frankly too small. Like there's just not enough
Yeah.
of that to kind of go into, or assets, right, in the Swiss side to kind of get into. So the euro, the pound, the yen, like people are kind of splitting among all of them. What I don't like long term about any of these, right? And this is without being a macro guy. So I'm sure there's if I post this and a macro investor guy kind of listens to these, like this guy has no idea what he's talking about. But the overall concern I think is still legitimate. Like a lot of these other countries actually are ultimately running budget deficits of some kind as well, right? Like
Yeah.
there's like long-term structural problems that the only real obvious politically tenable solution that they're all going to be able to do probably in the end, like the US with its budget deficit, is just to print enough money to pay off the debt and the interest, right?
Hmm.
In other words, inflate it away, which means that the value of the fiat currency goes down
Yeah.
in all of these scenarios, right? So this is why the default came down to, well, at the end of this chess game, gold ends up winning, right? Because you can't make more of that very easily, right? You
Yeah.
can mine it, but you can't print, right? And all these other guys are probably they will hit the print button if they get into a situation where they um, just can't make budget, right? Or whatever the
Huh.
case is. Yeah. So,
Interesting. What about there's a lot of like business, like I feel like everyone praises Saudi Arabia. How is that like currency over there? I don't even know what it's called.
yeah, I don't know either. It's not like a widely traded current. Ironically, the Saudis, because oil is transacted typically in dollars,
Mhm.
right? That's changing a bit, right? Because China got tired of paying dollars, right, to the Saudis when it's like, no, there's no Americans in this transaction. But historically, the norm is actually the Saudis always get paid in the global oil market is kind of denominated in dollars. So the Saudis take in a ton of kind of dollars. They buy a ton of treasuries. They own, I forget what the percentage is. It's probably something that, I should ask ChatGPT just to check up on more recently, but they own a very significant amount of US assets
Yeah.
across the board, right? Real estate, businesses, stocks, right? Saudis own a lot. Um, and what's interesting about kind of their base, right? They have an extremely low cost of production on oil, right?
Mhm.
So basically, as I understand it, the way the oil market globally actually works is the Saudis are producing it for like an unbelievably low amount of money per barrel, right? Their cost is so low, like they could price it down super low and they're still going to make money. But that's not true with pretty much everyone else, right?
Yeah.
If you're fracking in the US, if you're up there in like the oil sands in Canada, like
Yeah.
anywhere else, like it's a higher cost, so you need a higher price, which is why you sometimes see that like when the Saudis get really annoyed with everybody, they're just like, "Fuck you! I'm just gonna lower the price and like, blow you guys up," right? Which they do every once in a while when they get really
Yeah.
annoyed. So, but they're able to kind of rake in huge amounts of money because of just that natural advantage and the fact that oil demand just keeps going up, right? Regardless of what everyone keeps sort of
Yeah.
thinking. Yeah, so it's a good gig if you can get it.
Hmm. Yeah. I don't know. I this if every like world currency is going to shit, it just makes me think like about how powerful the internet is and like what is the currency of the internet. And sometimes I think it's not like Bitcoin or Ethereum, but attention. And it's like, how do you like tokenize that as an asset? Like there's the tokenization of real world assets, but like I don't know. I feel like
Oh,
this that's not like a world I'm crazy familiar with. Uh, but I think it's like I don't know. Everyone's constantly on their phones. Everyone's like, all these
Yeah.
apps are dying for eyes. And it's like, what is this attention in this like attention economy? Like, what, how do you, yeah, I don't know.
I
Just
think
like
that's a
thinking.
very interesting question, right? I mean, here's the thing, like for older guys like me, I actually can't easily understand or envision what the new global financial system that's going to replace all the stuff that's falling apart
Hmm.
is going to look like, right? Like because I have never seen anything else. I think it's like this tweaked slightly or like this plus Bitcoin or something, but I'm not sure that's actually accurate. It's just like lack of creativity. Because questions like yours
Mhm.
actually are pretty intriguing if you think about it, right? Attention is huge because it's directly related to things like advertising. But if you think about like advertising transactions, like you need a fiat currency in between. Well, what if you didn't use
Yeah.
that model, right? Which is kind of what you're saying. What if, as you say, tokenization, which again, I know even less than you, so I'm not going to try to speculate too much, but if there was some kind of other way in which this would manifest than things like, hey, we've got this advertising budget and like click through rates and ads or whatever, I think that would be super profound because you're right. Attention is in this world, and especially online, it would be everything, right? That's what you really see from social media.
So I'm actually remembering in 2018 or 2019, the founder of Mozilla Firefox launched a new browser, and it's called the Brave browser. And I have to look at the token now, but like essentially the concept was whenever you like watched ads or got ads placed in front of you when you were using the Brave browser, you would collect what's called like BAT tokens. And the BAT token was like it stood for basic attention token. And you could like exchange the BAT for USDC, other like tokens, but holy shit, this chart does not look good. Yeah, uh, maybe I think it was just maybe like too early. Like he just had this idea too early, or maybe I don't even. But yeah, it was made by the former founder of Firefox, actually. Um,
Here, what I'm
yeah.
going to do is I'm going to make you a co-host just in case you ever want to screen share it for any of
Oh,
this stuff.
cool. Yeah, this is yeah. I'll toss it up on the screen real quick. Um, there it is. Yeah. Powering the user first attention economy tokenizes the attention economy. Yeah,
Hmm.
I remember I bought a bunch of these in like 2018. They haven't really seen a lot of not a lot of action. Market cap. Wow, the market cap's still really high. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, I wonder if they're still like active
It's
since
still trading though, right? So,
yeah, let's see. There's markets. Yeah. Actually it looks like yeah, definitely still trading. Not a lot of oh wow, actually 1.6 some volume. Um some not a lot there. Yeah, looks like it's still trade. I'm gonna do some research on this and see like if they're still kicking or if they gave up a while ago. But I used the browser for a little while back in the I think there was also like there was a way to like link it to YouTube so you can tip people in on
hmm.
YouTube in bat tokens and stuff, but uh
I
private
see.
network. Huh. Yeah, I did see they were like working with specific like regular advertisers and stuff. Yeah, something worth reading about more later. I completely forget. Yeah, so maybe the idea is already being worked on. Um,
Yeah, maybe. But these experiments I think are very intriguing. Um, yeah, these things are always intriguing because they offer a kind of an intriguing tool, and then what's always kind of the question is, all right, will the rest of the ecosystem of the world kind of be able to conform to that in a way that makes sense for all of us to kind of hop on?
yeah.
Um,
What do you think about this idea? This is going to be crazy. but the idea of like the tokenization of people. So you know how like companies IPO to get more capital so they can go and do like what they want,
Yeah.
grow and make more money for shareholders. Like what if at like 14 or 15 or 18 you like issue it, you tokenize yourself and like people can like buy your like Bryan tokens and you get like you let's say you get Ethereum, Bitcoin, or USDC for these Bryan tokens, and you can use that to go to college. And then like the more like let's say I graduate college or I drop out of college and Bryan token goes down a ton, and then I launch a startup, people start buying Bryan token again, the startup explodes, and like I'm like thinking about this in like this abstract like way where you can like tokenize yourself similar to the way like companies IPO in order to access capital to kind of do what you want, right? Like there'd be a way for people to like, you know how like the companies publish their 10Ks and like their pre-IPO filings, but like people doing that. Or maybe this is just like
Okay. So let's man, this is why I love talking with you about these things, Brian, because when we talk finance, like I feel old, that's one, but the other is that you have radical sort of ideas because in your world actually this stuff makes sense, right? Like you should be thinking about kind of tokenization of what and then just like spitballing ideas, whereas in my world I'm like which fiat currency or gold, right? So intellectually, like yours is a much more interesting kind of question. And here's the thing. Okay, so if we did the IPO analogy, I mean, companies do it to raise capital, but what people get in exchange is, in principle, a share of ownership, right? This and therefore that entitles you to some kind of income stream in principle, right? At least this is kind of what we're all taught in school, right? What would the token be entitled to? Like your paycheck? Is this kind of what you're going after, or
I don't know yet. I was
yeah?
literally thinking about it right now. I would, yeah, because I guess if it's part of your paycheck or rights to you, this is basically us coming in a full circle back to slavery at that point. Huh. Uh,
But where you get to choose to sell yourself into a version of slavery, ironically, right?
yeah, I guess you could pick and choose like who your investors are, right? Like
You
similar to
can
like,
also declare bankruptcy in principle, right? You could just
yeah,
like,
you can. You can be like, all right, sorry, but
yeah,
everyone tokens going to zero. I got my enough drugs to last me the next 10 years, and I'll worry
right.
about this later. Um, yeah, I well,
I
it's
I'm
go
gonna
ahead.
say something. Okay, no, 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 wait. Yours is gonna be more insightful. What I'm about to say is gonna take us down a very degenerate path. So you first.
Well, what I was gonna say is like you kind of have these like backers by default, like this support network that would exist, right? Like they're even more incentivized to see you succeed because now they've like financially invested in you, right? Like it's
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. It seems I guess I haven't fully thought this out. Just ideas pop into my head.
No, but it's funny as we're talking about it. At first, I was like, Brian, this seems like it has lots of holes in it. But as we're talking about it, I'm like, wait, I can actually see the real use case potentially for this. So tell me if this makes sense to you. So if you're a celebrity,
Yeah.
right, or like a pop star, for some reason I'm thinking of the K-pop group BTS, for
Yeah,
example,
yeah.
right, which has a huge, they have what like their fans are called what, the BTS army or something like that. Um, like what's sort of traditionally kind of thought is like you go buy a BTS poster, you buy their music, you go to the concert, and that's your expression.
Yeah.
What about BTS coin, right? Or something like that, right? Or one attached to the members. And that would be your way to kind of show your fan solidarity potentially, right? But then more than that, what if that coin like traded and changed in value over time, which is exactly what you're proposing?
Yeah.
So then you actually have, in principle, a financial incentive to hop on a gravy train with the rise of a celebrity
Yep.
as they're rising, right? Because you would financially benefit. And this is
Yep.
totally devoid of connecting it to their paychecks, right? I'm just talking about meme coin-ish,
Yeah.
but sort of sentimental value because you actually like them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reason why I said this is going to go down a degenerate path, actually, the first example I was thinking was not BTS. That's a cleaner example. But over in Asia, right? I'm still kind of fascinated by this phenomenon, right? Even though I'm like East Asian by descent. In places like Korea and Japan, I'm going to pick on Japan for a second. There is a weather network TV show or a TV channel where they have these very attractive female anchors that have extremely loyal male fans and
Huh.
followings, right? Who get extraordinarily pissed off if they discover that these anchors are dating a guy, right?
What?
Yeah, yeah. And so this is a cultural difference too, because even in South Korea, this is like a thing. I cannot wrap my head around this but I think it's because I grew up here. I'm just like, why would that be such a thing? But it is, right? I just know that factually it is. And like a lot of these fans are, well, they're males, as you can imagine, right, for these TV anchors, and they're like these are some of the guys who would put up a lot of money for these coins, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's
And
kind of like the OnlyFans dudes, right? Like they'll
yeah, and that was the
I
other thing that popped in my head. I was like, this is that crowd, but in
yeah,
a different way. And imagine if those dudes then could trade coins. How much more fun would that be than just like paying over and being the biggest fan for someone on that,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
I could easily see that world if it's not already happening, like that would happen, or that we'll see coins trade and rise and fall with people's popularity, even without having any legal rights or connection to the economic earnings of these individuals.
Like I think this woman Iggy Azalea launched a coin, and then there were some like interesting, like really influential investors in crypto that were like hyping her up and saying it was going to be like the next big thing. But like this is the let's pull up the Iggy chart. I think this is the token. This is the Iggy Azalea coin.
Oh, oh, it's quite a ride.
Oh, yeah. Uh, so there are like celebs like it's different because like some of like these token launches feel really like grifty,
Hmm.
kind of just drop a tweet, this is my token, and people just like buy it, and um you know and I think we saw that at the start of this year from a couple folks, right? uh
Not to be named, but yes,
Not to
yes.
be named, yeah. um yeah, so yeah, tokenization of people.
I So the reason why I think that this idea that we just kicked back and forth, why I still think it has potential despite these initial colossal failures, is I think the problem with some of these, right? There's probably multiple issues there, is that they're already fairly well known and established.
Yep.
If we're talking about just debut, up and coming, and you're talking about like the people who would be on the front wave of a trend,
Yep.
having those people have coins that start off as essentially almost worthless, and then just seeing how that does, I think that you would see a different chart. That would be my hypothesis.
Dude, if a high school graduating class decided that they were gonna like tokenize their students and like publish profiles, and I can like read their Twitters and like see their grades and see like just them like their Instagram, and I could decide whether or not to buy the token, I think that would be the most fun thing ever to like just
Agreed.
analyze like who they are and see what happens in 10 years.
I uh I totally agree. But I think some version of this idea of the tokenization of people is actually going to happen because celebrities in some sense already are a product,
Yeah.
right? That and they absolutely monetize in multiple different ways, right? They have images they need to maintain. They have like professional staff to make sure they maintain those images and like you don't see the stuff that doesn't fit, right? So,
Yeah.
um, I mean, it already lends itself pretty naturally to this. I mean, this is one of those things where I feel like that, it might start off in like the dirtiest corners of
Oh,
of
yeah.
of the bit. Like we might just start seeing it in OnlyFans, for example, right?
Yeah. You're saying this, and now I wonder, like, this gets crazy because it's like, okay, if both in like porn and movies, it becomes like AI generated, do you end up in a world where people would pay like a premium to see a movie made with like real people? And it's like,
That's a good question.
is there this like authentic factor? And that's kind of where I'm wondering, where like, hey, would like proof that this is also like a like proof of like personhood is like a
Yeah.
concept that exists, like that people toss around in like this crypto world. Like, who like is this a real person? And I
I,
wonder if yeah, go
I
ahead.
could actually see I could actually see that it wouldn't turn out that way. And this
Oh,
might
you
be because you
oh
and I are both generationally maybe a bit kind of embedded enough in the current social structure that it's actually hard for us to imagine a world where AI and humans would be valued actually relatively similarly, right? In some
huh.
sense. I Did you ever see that movie Her? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I've seen a trailer, but it's basically a guy with a robot girlfriend or something.
AI girlfriend, right? The voice
Yeah.
is Scarlett Johansson.
Uh-huh.
Um, and here's why I think that not only is that coming, that's already happening, Brian. I don't
Yeah.
Probably you don't have friends that are openly admitting it, or maybe you have friends that prefer people, but there certainly is a demographic of people that have already started to use AI for kind of faux companionship or just like to
Yeah.
relax or just
Yeah.
sort of dipping their toes in, right? And that's only going to get better as time goes by. I've heard, again, I don't have any like evidence for this. I've heard rumors that Chinese AIs are actually better at kind of emotional connection in
Yeah.
conversation as opposed to ChatGPT or something. I do, just for the record, I do not use ChatGPT and treat it like a person. I treat it like I would do a Google search. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't actually, right? So when ChatGPT first in the beginning was like trying to be very positive and stuff, I just told it to like not do that. Just tell me
Yeah.
the facts because you're an AI, right? Like I don't need to think about you as a person. So,
Yeah.
um, but I think maybe other people are going the other way, right? They're like, wait, what if I treated you like a person? Would you respond to me like a person?
Yep.
And so I began to think that movie Her might be extremely prescient. And Brian, you know that there are humans in the world that love dogs more than people because dogs are loyal, right?
Yep.
They
Yeah.
won't betray you, right? They're sort of loving and unconditional. Imagine like an AI that would be like that,
Yeah.
right? Like just tell you how amazing you are all the time, like a
Yeah.
narcissist dream, for example, right? And it's hard to find that in a person, right? Someone that would worship you endlessly all day long, for example, right? If you've got a personality disorder that loves that, right? And so I could imagine large markets for certain types of AIs that would be preferred over humans, the way that, we value the companionship and loyalty of dogs that we can rarely get from humans.
So it's really interesting that you bring this up because I think literally the other day I pulled up this thread. This dude at A16Z was talking about uh, AI companions in games and kind of talking about how like these you'll have this like companion in whatever like video game you're playing, and this AI companion will like over time just like be, as he says, represent community and represent emotional support. And uh he also, I think that he was talking about it somewhere else where like it would grow into like something like similar to like therapists, like it's
Yeah.
providing all these different things for a human with, but like, And I think that's something like most people. I definitely take it for granted because I feel like I have enough friends to talk to and like vent and complain about. But I know for a fact there are a lot of people like the place they go to would typically be Reddit, and you know it having this like companion on the internet that knows everything about you, you know, can help you kind of find. I think 2 days ago I was like hanging out with my friend Joe, and I was like, hey, we should ask ChatGPT this question based on every single conversation we've had. I asked ChatGPT like what it thought my blind spots were. And it's like this thing like has known me pretty well over the past 7 or 8 months, 7 or 8 months, whenever it launched. I've just been like a pretty voracious user of it. But like, I think can help you find some blind spots. How did I get down this road? Oh yeah, the AI companions and
Yeah. Oh,
companions.
so the version of it that you just showed me, I think is for gaming. I actually wouldn't be surprised if it was quite normal for all of us to have like an AI assistant
Yeah.
that we actually have a relationship with
Yeah.
in a vague sense, like the way you'd have a relationship with your dog. Like
Yep.
you just wouldn't go anywhere without it. Like you'd be chatting with the AI all day long, and that it would be an integrated part of your life. Because how many times are we asking ChatGPT? Like I find myself asking ChatGPT more and more as time goes by, and I only know it AI will get better, right? It's not
Yeah.
going to get worse, and then it will probably start to act more and more human.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it responds to you in a way that like you kind of on some visceral level feel like I think I can actually have a relationship with this AI of some kind, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just like a Google search equivalent. I think the moment that it tips to that point for the majority of humans, then yeah, that's the norm, right? I mean, the future is that there's all sorts of side discussions with that about is that healthy? Like, what does that mean for kids growing up? Because usually a normal part of human development is like fitting in with peers and community.
Yeah.
Um, like, certainly there are plenty of people with personality disorders where you don't want an AI kind of egging them on and telling them that they're great when actually they're
Yeah,
being
that's true. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Uh, like you don't want psycho AI kind of like helping out the psychos. Like there's a
Absolutely.
lot of sort of deep questions around this kind of stuff, but at least at the moment, because it hasn't crossed that threshold for most of us, right? It's no more a tool than like a companion. We
Yeah.
haven't had to think about that yet. So
Huh. Yeah, I guess where it gets interesting is like I'm comfortable having like an AI on my phone through the Chat GPT app. But when you think about a world where you have like this tiny little robot floating around following you, that I think I'd pass on that. Uh, if it was like a physical manifestation versus like this internet manifestation.
but you already have a mild version of that. That's effectively what our smartphone with ChatGPT is in a
Yeah,
sense,
that's fair. Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
Guess I didn't
if
think
we,
about it that
I
way.
mean,
Yeah.
like, is that you're not describing a world that's that different than the one you're already in, right? In that
You're
sense.
100% right. Yeah, I thought of it as a phone and not as this little creature. Now I'm looking at my phone weird.
I
um,
mean, kind of, right? I mean, what if it was a
right.
device that could fly around and follow you around, and you just chat back and forth, right? And then you can put it in your pocket when it's done flying. Like, I mean, that's
I
yeah.
guess like then things to think about in a world like that are, you know, I guess like one from like an investing perspective is like, hey, what happens when your like AI companion dies and you're in like a pretty critical situation? Do you like charge this overnight like your phone? Like how do you keep it alive at all times? Does it need to be alive at all times? Like what's
Mm.
proper decorum? Do you bring one to like a date? Like I don't know. It's just like a um, I
For
yeah.
sure, it's a more complicated world with all that stuff, right? I mean, what you and I have also not talked about is the potential for the incredibly dark side to manifest from that, which is because all of this is essentially a data feed 24/7. right, into some central place, right? Whoever's kind of
Yeah.
controlling and managing the AI, because it's not decentralized, right?
There
So
are like a bunch of there are like two pretty popular decentralized storage solution crypto projects. So like maybe that's where you put it. You don't trust the um a centralized storage service. But yeah, right now I think most people would be like, yeah, I don't give a shit where it goes.
yeah, and I think that's true right now. But that battle is coming, right? This kind of because there are economic benefits to having a centralized AI, right? Like the training is terribly expensive, and you need kind of all that stuff. And then there's the decentralized version, which would protect our privacy, but then actually would be harder to monetize because, as you know, so much of the business model of big tech is actually taking the data, not the money, right? And
Yeah.
so the more data, the better. And ChatGPT or like other AIs, man, this is even better than Google because it's even like you're actually asking real time questions with the complexity of information that I mean
Yeah.
we take for granted, but the thing is just collecting all that stuff.
I've stopped using Google. I don't
Yeah,
Google stuff anymore. It's
yeah,
crazy. Like,
yeah. And I would have dumped Google stock if it weren't for the fact that they had to have a competitive AI now, right? Like
yeah, Gemini,
it's very
right?
clear. Yeah, exactly. So they're still in the game, but yeah, it's very clear that this is kind of where it's all going. We will see a battle between a decentralized versus more centralized. And like this is not kind of the perfect analogy, but like, do I use WhatsApp or do I use Signal or Telegram, right? Kind of thing
Yeah.
to kind of do this. So and hopefully we'll have kind of choices for both. But yeah, that will be a huge battle later as it becomes very clear we all need an AI companion.
I'm surprised to hear a lot, when like regular people use Signal. It kind of blows my mind. I'm like,
Yeah, but that tells you a lot, right? Because Signal as an app functions, in my mind, just as well as WhatsApp. Like, there's not you don't have to pay by having a crappier messaging app. You
yeah,
just need to download it and be willing to use it, and then, like get people you like on it, right? And so the fact that in your world, in my world's the same, right? Most people I'm going to be WhatsApping with, frankly, even now,
yeah,
right? Um, the fact that it's still that much of everybody on the other thing when it's not that hard to switch to the other tells me that overwhelmingly centralized AI is likely to have an enormous advantage unless people really start to get spooked, right? Like if
mm,
there's an event where like whoa,
mm,
like they're doing what with us because we haven't seen one of those events yet, right? Like Meta and these guys are very very careful not to kind of illustrate kind of how far it goes, right? Like
yeah,
how far they can go in.
huh? Yeah, I wonder what an event like that would be.
It would have to be something extraordinary. um,
I mean, one thing that like would be freaky for me is like, hey, what if someone gets access to my ChatGPT login and they see every single thing I've ChatGPT? That's kind of freaky. Um, but I don't think that's what you're suggesting when you think about like
no,
a crazy event.
it would have to be something like a political rival in an election. Let's say that because of this person's use of AI, whoever's controlling the AI knows that they have severe mental health issues, and they can even see when they're having bad episodes, right? Because
Huh.
um, that's super valuable, and so I could see in the wrong hands a lot of that stuff could be used, right?
Yeah, I assume like if you have enough money and you know a contact at like Twitter, you could probably get them to like give you give you data on like DMs. I think this is like also like I'm not like very sure, but I imagine SIM swaps happen this way, right? Like you have a contact that works at like the a mobile phone store, and like, huh, yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because all the headlines and everything now, it's all about the tariff war and the sort of the ending of the current financial system in the way that it is. And that is the right headline for now, but we're going to come right back to AI not too long from now once the dust settles, and that will become a very, very kind of dominant part of the conversation. Um, yeah, yeah. I think it's a good thing you're in crypto, Brian, because I can tell you some of my friends in tech, right, in Silicon Valley are worried about AI actually replacing them. Like they're already kind of having that conversation. We still don't know exactly what job displacement from AI kind of will look like yet, partly because it's happening like AI is rapidly growing so fast and people are still trying to figure out what to do with it, right? But there will
Yeah.
be eventually like a baseline of like, oh, we need these tools for this and therefore it has these implications for employment. So there is definitely going to be a degree of displacement and reshuffling in the labor markets, right? In all types. But the fact that the AI is improving, AI in general is improving so rapidly, and in principle, there's no limit, right? AI can get better and better, better, and one day even maybe get sentient, right? Depending on what
Yeah.
standard we use for, and then even then, like still go, right? Like go even beyond that. Um, that starts to sort of raise lots of questions then about like how many jobs are viable, like in even 2 and 3 plus years later, right? Like, do we really need for this kind of thing? So
Well, I wonder like what gets displaced first. Is it like white collar people in tech, or is it, you know, blue collar folks that work at, car dealerships, McDonald's, Walmart, ShopRite, places like that? Like what
yeah,
gets displaced first?
that's a good question. So my friends in Silicon Valley at least are telling me things like coding jobs, like
Mhm.
AI is actually kind of replacing software
Oh
engineers.
yeah, I don't know SQL at all, but we have a product at Chainalysis that's essentially like how do you like access to our data. And I don't know how to run queries or like know how to do data things, but I can talk to AI and say, hey, this is the table. I want to figure this out. And it'll just write a query for me. And I'm like, holy shit, this is amazing. Now I can like take advantage of this huge data set and have no actual SQL
Yeah,
skills, coding knowledge at all. I just need to know how to talk to a robot.
yeah. And so this is what I'm already hearing. So software engineers, which are normally like very white collar, pretty well paying jobs, are starting to get replaced, like maybe even in large numbers because of
Huh.
AI. Big tech is probably where we would see the biggest kind of displacements first because they're making the biggest investments. They kind of understand the tech the best. They'd be
Yeah.
thinking about it first before everyone else. Um, but I think in general, we will see jobs like in the creative industries. We're already seeing people kind of get displaced. So I have one of my best friends. Her cousin actually works, used to, I should say, past tense, for Disney as an animator.
Mhm.
And she just lost her job recently, and she does not actually expect to find another job again because AI
Huh.
is essentially. I mean, I don't know if you've tried asking ChatGPT to create comics. It actually can do a rudimentary job
Oh,
of that.
what crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I had a friend show this to me recently. I was like, "You've got to be kidding!" Because I can't draw for anything, but it's just able to do this, and this is just the kind of elementary school version, right?
I've had
So
it create images, but never comics. That's huh. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
you, we're probably like within I'm going to make up a number, within 2 years of actually being able to create maybe even cartoons and maybe even animations, right?
Yeah.
And then in 5 years, it's probably like movies of a certain quality, right? You could actually just script, create, like all that stuff, which normally takes a huge crew and huge investment.
There it's sick. I actually just followed this like AI video generating uh product recently. I'll pull it up. It's called Higgsfield AI.
Hmm.
And let me find it real quick. It just like has been creating ads. Uh and ads that are like actually really good. Let's pull it up here. So this is Higgsfield AI, and it's like this AI platform for creators, but it makes this like video content.
Yeah.
It made an ad for Gillette today, and this is the ad.
Oh, I see.
Like that's kind of a good ad.
Yeah.
Um, there was some other stuff it created that I was just like absolutely like mesmerized by. Um, but it's like, all right, oh yeah, there was like for cars, like what? Why do you need like a team to like record uh you know
Yeah.
stuff like this anymore? Uh,
Yeah. And I think that's in the limit. That's actually, I think, what a lot of firms might look like is just really, really good creative people
mhm.
who know how to prompt like really,
Yeah,
really well.
prompt
And
engine.
then like tons of business meetings in these places where like a bunch of creatives are just looking at things like this and figuring out what they're going to go with. But then all the production folks that make this, you don't
Yeah,
need them, right?
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It also, it. I wonder if something like this can like displace Netflix, right? Like right now we rely on Netflix to create content and videos, but like what if anyone on the planet with an imagination could create like and I think we're in a position for this to be more likely because everyone is consuming micro content right now. And I don't want to bring it back to like the tokenization thing, but that's where I'd be like, I want to buy that guy's token. Like this guy is building
yeah,
this, you know. So I
yeah.
wonder, I don't know. We went everywhere, and I went everywhere because of
No,
that.
but that's I think in general a really positive thing is because the barriers to entry, right? I'll use a strategy term in the sense like are just falling through the floor at this
Yeah,
rate. We are going to see an explosion of creativity. Think stories that like we just wouldn't have heard of before. We are going to hear because all the amount of creativity in the world latent is like it just unbelievable, right? We just don't see it most of the
yeah,
time. So, yeah, Hollywood already is suffering because of Netflix in the sense that they don't have they spend huge think of Disney for example. They spent huge amounts of money to create established kind of brand name content like the Star Wars franchise or Marvel or whatever.
yeah,
And that works to a degree, but the trend that's off trend, right? Trend is actually really creative content that's relatively cost effective that can explode, right? And so Netflix does something like Squid Game, which Disney on its best day can't do, right? They have
yeah,
no idea like
yeah,
about that stuff. Netflix has a significant margin there because they like have data that would help them kind of make better bets. But I think even beyond this, if you kind of open the playing field up for everyone, we will see like lots of people kind of come out of nowhere and just give us really great stories and videos and kind of webtoons or whatever it is. It's going to
yeah,
be like a renaissance for the creatives, ironically, but not on the production side, on the idea and storytelling side.
yeah. So to loop it back, you think blue collar is safer than white collar right now?
No, only because robots are running in parallel to AI, but no one's paying attention.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no, that story, and then what did my colleague say the other day? Maybe they're calling it physical AI, but ultimately the final end game is you fuse a robot or a device with an AI, right? And so we will see, humanoid looking robots walking around,
Yeah,
that increasingly start to act human to us, right? So
yeah, yeah.
that's coming.
It's, yeah, and I go to if these humanoids, like, do you pay these humanoids? What do you pay these humanoids in? Is it in dollars? Do they have like another currency? Uh, why would, yeah, huh.
Yeah,
Interesting. So you think white collar and blue collar would get screwed at the
yeah,
same rate?
yeah. The future is actually, I mean, there's multiple different futures I think that are possible, but the most kind of positive one I can see is where there's just a massive creativity explosion
Mhm.
where where like everybody we know is a creative on some level, right? Because all the production kind of stuff like it has become quite cheap. So then it's about like, well, what can you imagine, right? Making,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, that's cool.
And that becomes the defining skill, right? Which is,
Yeah.
by the way, something that we do an incredibly bad job of teaching right now, right? Like none of us
Yeah.
teach this. So there's all kinds of related questions to that, but yeah, I think what we really want is having, do we really want? That's a value statement. What we're going to see is that people who are truly creative and expressive and are just have lots of great ideas will finally get to be able to express in a way because at scale, because it's so much cheaper. It's kind of the everything else that's a little problematic. Like if you were to look at a list of occupations in a developed economy, or actually even if it's not a developed economy, you don't actually see a lot of creativity, right? You see a lot
Yeah.
of kind of
Dentist,
repetitive,
doctor,
right?
teacher.
So doctor, lawyer, teacher, like we all can sort of by regulation and maybe by some degree of necessity, like all of those, they're not going to disappear. They will change profoundly. But I'm more worried about like regular office job, right? And then even by extension, middle managers,
What's
right?
regular office job? You mean like product marketing manager, product manager, or like
Yeah. Yeah, because like and it's not that do you need any, it's the question is like do you need five or do you need two who are really good who are using prompts all the time, right?
yeah,
And I think the answer is the latter, right?
yeah,
And so in a manufacturing and production process, as robots keep getting cheaper and better, do you need a full assembly line full of people, or do you just need like five people who know how to program robots and work with them, and otherwise the robots are just doing their thing, right? I
yeah,
think we're converging to the latter. So then the question is, what does everybody else do when they're getting displaced, when they're not educated to sort of be phenomenally creative, right? Like that's our fault. We didn't do a
yeah.
good job of that. Um, and they're just going to
I
be
don't know. It's great.
frustrated and not sure, right?
It- yeah, there's a whole conversation around what could or should they do, but I guess, do you think creativity is something that's taught, or is it like,
Huh. Um, I'm not aware of it being taught particularly effectively in any university kind of context, but of course, colleagues in like the art department or acting might vehemently disagree with this, and they would do a way better job than us in business school, right? I can't think of anything. Bryan, I mean, you tell me. You did a full MBA's worth of courses. Did you take anything that kind of pushed you on the creativity scale?
one class,
Okay.
predicting the future of technology, by Amy Webb, which
Okay.
like it was just kind of strategy on steroids, but like use your imagination and think of all the crazy shit that could happen down the road and like blend it all in together was kind of the TLDR. I think that was
Okay.
it. But that was a half semester course. Yeah. I think anything like that forces you to think, like strategy did that, right?
Yeah,
But it was on historical cases. So
that's right.
yeah, I think anything that forces you to think about the future is like max create well the most fruitful for creativity from business school, I would guess.
Yeah, and we don't have enough of that. Like I actually teach a version of Amy's class now, right?
Yeah,
And it goes well. Like the students really like it. It like gives them a
yeah,
chance to let their hair down and all that. But as a percentage of the curriculum, I think it's kind of like yours. It's like one class, right?
yeah,
They get to kind of do this. When in reality, if like that's the defining thing, like we should be structuring a whole like curriculum to kind of help build that. But to be honest, your average professor, regardless of tier of school, isn't even qualified to do that, right? That's
yeah,
just not even like that's like they don't even know, right? How to, like even me, like how would I'd have to I'd have to really kind of hunker down and really kind of be transformative, I think, if I was going to try to come out and do that for real. So,
yeah. And I guess like you wouldn't really even teach creativity, right? You would teach kind of like ways to think. And I think those are two like very different things.
I agree. This is one reason I enjoy our conversations is because in your world with crypto, because there's still many pieces that are not well defined,
Yeah.
right? So I have a friend who's like a very senior tech guy in one of the big banks, and the way I asked him like, "Right, what do you guys think about with crypto? Because you're at a bank," and he basically says the way he thinks about it. It's a technology that's trying to find a use, which has some legitimacy to that argument. The beauty of it is that that means that you really need to be an imagination person in that world, right? You can't
Yeah.
sort of be like, well, this is my job, this is what I do. Like, I'm gonna just keep doing this for the next 20 years. That mindset isn't gonna get you anywhere in crypto, right?
Oh,
So everyone in your world is thinking quite differently and imaginatively. And I love that about our conversations because you bring up stuff like tokenization of people. I'm like, man, I was here thinking about gold, right? Just a moment ago. And so it's really kind of nice that you're in that world because I think it naturally has you working those muscles anyway.
yeah,
Um, suffice it to say, I'm not sure all of your classmates are working those muscles at the same degree every day. So,
yeah,
right.
yeah. I I can agree based on the handful I talked to. Some feel like their brains are melting.
A unfortunate part of this. So I think that if we wanted to be positive about what's about to come, I think it's that your brain won't be melting due to like lack of engagement or challenge, right? I think
Yeah.
if anything, it'll go very much the other way. Um, but what
I,
most people do. I think that world, like in a positive framing, the opportunity is just immense, right? We're about to see more creativity. Because Brian, if you've ever have you been to Italy before? Like if you go see, for example, like
yeah.
the chapels where Michelangelo, for example, like Sistine Chapel and all this kind of stuff. This was actually a very small number of super talented people who were lucky and were given enormous amounts of resources to
Mhm.
create in a society in a time period where like frankly no one else had the luxury to do that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So what we actually see is a relatively small amount of creative content relative to probably what was possible in the population. Like most people just weren't doing creative stuff.
Yeah.
So imagine a world then you flip that upside down where like a gigantic swath of the population now has the ability to create creative stuff on a relatively level playing field. You don't have to be Leonardo da Vinci, for example. Like what would you see? And I think we'd see something we've never seen before. Like it's just mind-blowing kind of stuff.
Y- You know, I guess like one thing that is worrying about a world where everyone has the capacity to put this cool content out and create it is like similar to social media now. Like I feel like good posts are often could be overlooked, right? Just by how they rank in the algorithm. Like at the end of the day, is it the person like if we're thinking about this creative content that's gets created, goes viral and like creates a name for people, like having influence over this algorithm that exists and like what gets surfaced to people is like even more important. Um and like how do you break past that? Like being because at the end of the day, even you're decentralizing access to all of this, all the tools you need to be creative and create all this cool stuff. The distributor of this is still centralized and it's like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that. And like, how do you deal with that? I guess is
Yeah, I would guess there's a couple answers. So the algorithm thing, that's always going to be a thing, I think. The other is that what we might see, for example, in book publishing, because there's tons of like, even before all this, scripts or not scripts, but like manuscripts kind of flying around. And so that's why they have agents, right? Agents are basically there as not a perfect by any means, but like a filter to kind of filter out all the stuff that they're pretty sure isn't going to work and just focus on the few things that might. It's a very imperfect way to evaluate. It would be interesting to see whether AI is able to evaluate these things at scale, for example, right?
oh, this is actually really cool because actually there is that gaming protocol I was telling you about, Sanko. Some dude created this mini game on there where it's you are pitted against another player and you're given a prompt and you're supposed to draw the prompt. And you have a certain amount of time to draw the prompt. And uh, when you're both done, AI actually judges and picks the better prompt. Or picks the better picture, and you win these DMT tokens. But I thought that was really cool. So it's
Yeah.
already judging.
Oh yeah, we will see that. I think more, AI will play a more active role in judgment, and we will trust AI to judge things more and
Huh.
more. There are really good and bad things about that. I think if you're someone who's been educated to be a good critical thinker and you already are kind of your imagination muscle is well developed, then it's a phenomenal kind of counterbalance, right? Because when AI goes off the rails, like you'll know, right?
Mhm.
And so you're not going to let it cause trouble. What I worry about though is people who grow up through the educational system, like just using the AI to provide the answers, right? And not developing critical thinking, not kind of, and
Oh,
just essentially following the AI to whatever end that it wants. This is what worries me, right?
yeah.
Is that we might see a world like that, and in that world, human sentience doesn't matter that much then, right? So
Yeah, that's kind of haunting.
yeah, we're trending that way at the moment a little bit, but maybe we'll turn the corner because I do think a lot of things will have to get reformed. Education being a huge one in an AI world, because the old model of like, hey, you go to business school and then you're going to get this job. In the limit, like it won't be the same job for sure, right? And we will have to kind of start getting into things like creativity and all of this stuff. Yeah, and think about like who are the best people to even teach that kind of stuff. I mean, there's big questions I think about critical thinking. I think being the biggest actually, because it's hard to kind of make bets on technology or particular types of things and be accurate for a long period of time.
Yeah.
But critical thinking is like you're going to need that for the rest of your life, right? So
So, if I asked you, if I said you had to like pick one person to teach a creativity course, dead or alive, who or what do you think what do you think you'd pick?
this is really hard. I actually don't know that I know a person because if we think about really great creatives, I
Mhm.
think a lot of them they would have tremendous difficulty breaking down their process and what they do, right?
Yeah.
Right. So think about like a Vincent Van Gogh, right? And these types. I mean, these people in some ways they were already geared up for being creative because their minds worked in certain ways and they didn't have to like write down like, man, I can't think of what to paint today. Let me like try to
Yeah.
figure out this framework of how I'm going to figure. That's not like how they did it, right? So I think what we've seen in the past is a lot of what we might call naturals, right? People who kind of were already pretty gifted, pretty like 90% of the way there kind of thing. Partly because we were so bad at teaching it or we don't know how
Yeah.
to teach it. So that's what you see. But now we're going to move into a world, I think, where, well, we kind of need to figure out how to teach it to everybody. Otherwise, we're just going to have a bunch of people that don't know what they're doing and can't find economically viable employment with good career paths, right? And so I think teaching creativity is going to be a huge, like a bigger and bigger and bigger thing as time goes by because everyone will slowly figure out that all the routine stuff AI can totally do because that's like AI strength, right?
Yeah. No, I wonder what like a curriculum on creativity would even look like.
I Yeah, I don't know either, and I'm to be perfectly candid with you, I'm going to say this out of turn because I really should go talk to a bunch of people in more creative parts of the university before I say something on the subject, but it wouldn't surprise me if actually we came up really short on that, even in the departments where you'd think that we'd, have
Yeah.
more, right? Yeah, I think that will be like the $1 trillion question, and probably even more than a trillion, going forward, because everyone in the world is going to be competing on that. The creative world, right, Brian? Part of what makes it so hard, if you think about creative fields, right, whether it's authors, whether it's people making movies, whether it's actors or musicians, these traditionally creative fields, the correlation between going to the best school in that subject matter at a university and then being the top actor or musician is basically zero or negative, right? So it doesn't follow like a really nice
If you do.
structured career path the way that like law school makes you go into this top law firm does, or going to like Yale or Harvard med school gets you into this. Like that has a pretty clear path and a game that everybody knows how to play. And it's not, but these are also non-creative paths fundamentally, right?
Yeah.
Like, so that works because it's not that on some level. And so in a world where everything starts shifting, like a lot of the economics into the creative, that's super exciting, but extremely scary if you're a fan of the old educational system and those structures and career ladders, because none of that stuff works, right, in
Yeah.
that world. Which either means you have to figure out how to make it a way that like is more predictable, which I'm not sure one can, or really take a leap of faith and like figure out how are we going to get everybody up to thinking critically and doing these things, but not being able to guarantee them a job at a giant bank, right, at the associate level, right, or something
Yeah.
like that, right? So yeah, that's kind of the that's an interesting thing. I think you being in crypto is absolutely a wonderful part of this because you're I told you this before, you're on trend, right? So crypto is absolutely going to be part of the new world because it's part of this new financial birthing of whatever's coming, right? Crypto will absolutely be a part of that. Um, and so it's a good thing that you're on trend in this way, right? And so, yeah, I think this is a very positive thing in your case. We just have to kind of see how it shakes out.
Before the conversation used to be like, what do you do? And I'm now it's like, do you like what you do? Do you like love it? Like, do you, and dude, everyone's like, no. And I'm like, oh my God. Like,
Yeah, but that's the norm, right?
yeah, I know that's the freaky part. It's like the logic most people use because like I it was yesterday or 2 days ago. I was like asking this girl like, if you don't like your job, like why don't you just do something else? And she was like, well, it pays me, and I live in New York, and I can't just like quit. And then I was like, well, can't you just live somewhere else so you don't have to do a job you don't like? And she was like, like that wasn't that wasn't like a something within the realm of possibility for her, like leaving. And
Yeah,
it was kind of, I guess that's fair. I don't know what's fair or not. I just like, I don't know. I think people have different propensity for like what they are willing to put up with. Like, yeah, yeah.
that's one dimension of it, but they also have a different level of awareness, a level of, risk tolerance. We can say that too. Um, and I do think, frankly, it's a lot of it is fear, right? But manifested in a rational kind of explanation, right?
So
Or
do
an
you think it's risk tolerance, fear? Part of it was also there was a
oh,
third
like
thing.
a lack of imagination, right? Not to diss your friend, but
Huh.
yeah, I think some people struggle to kind of imagine. Let me give you a couple of examples. So, out in Thailand, there's a really big digital nomad culture, meaning like people who basically, you know what that is, right? So they make
Yeah.
their income through remote work. So part of what had that movement kind of grow was there's a few people who kind of figured that out. So, Tim Ferriss is not exactly a version of this, but he is in some sense, if you know who Tim Ferriss is. So he
Never.
wrote this book called The 4 Hour Work Week
Hmm.
and the published in the mid 2000s. And he basically was talking about this idea of, look, the idea that you work really hard and you kind of slave away at something you hate and then you retire when you're very old is a terrible idea, right? It's like wasting the vast majority of your life in just being miserable.
Mhm.
And so what he decides to do is instead of trying to make a whole bunch of money and sacrificing until he's old, he creates a different kind of lifestyle where he ends up going to Thailand and he's building this business that at some point it gets really successful, but then he's working too many hours. So then he's trying to figure out, well, how many, I just want to work very few hours, right? So he outsources a bunch of stuff and he makes less money. So he makes at the time something like 50,000 a year, which for Thailand is great, right? And then he just spends his life doing things like, doing Muay Thai, right? And deciding that he just wants to do, and by his own definition, has a much happier life. But writing that book, and it became a New York Times bestseller, inspired a bunch of people then to start thinking about going to do the same thing. And then a bunch of YouTubers came later and they basically show their life there and they talk about kind of what their daily life is like and believe, and then not shockingly a bunch of people then start coming over because they now see that there's like something tangible there, right, that
Yeah.
they can. And so people come in different ways, right? You have the pioneer, and then you have like some other people who kind of followed the book, and then but they're still kind of pioneers. And then you have bandwagon people, right? But bandwagon people, if we want to call them that, they really need to see enough people do it and to believe that it's real, and then they kind of go. And
Yeah.
so what stops those people? I mean, yeah, it's hard for them to imagine the details. It's really risky. Like they need proof of concept. Like there's a whole bunch of things that are gonna kind of push it in that realm for those people. And that's I think actually the vast excuse me, the vast majority of people.
Yeah.
So all this to say, Brian, you're a little bit of an outlier, which I think is a good thing. It's actually served you quite well. But it also, I think, shocks you then when you talk to a bunch of people and you start asking them like, hey, do you like what you do? And you're getting, to me, not surprising answers at all. It's like, no, I don't. And then you're surprised, right?
Yeah.
You're like, and then you have in your mind what seems like very rational conversations with them when you're like, well, if you hate it, why don't you do something else? And what correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You're probably thinking you're hearing a bunch of excuses at the end of the day.
Yeah. Excuses versus did you just like not think about this through all the lenses you should be thinking about it through, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like I guess it's like typically I think it falls back on like what are you willing to sacrifice so that you can do something that makes you not want to blow your brains out every day? And is it so like you would be in this instance, it'd be like you sacrificing currently living in the city and maybe you move somewhere else, but you do a job that like is more tolerable, I guess.
Yeah. Um, yeah. No, I think that's all true, right? But as a guy who works in education and who just had a conversation with a teacher, right, on a long flight, um, the way I see it is that a big part of why this happens, right, is because there's this whole story of dropping the ball on needing to do a bunch of things to help people kind of steer differently.
Mhm.
And then before they know it, they're like, even by their mid 20s, they're just not equipped to kind of know anything better than to be the person talking to you and being like, yeah, well, then I'd have to leave New York, or then I don't even know what that world looks like, right?
But they do like develop like one good skill like through all this, right? Like grit.
Yeah, I thought about this because grit
I
has been
don't,
a huge thing, right?
yeah, I think I have, I think the only reason I have grit is because I used to run a fuck ton and it was always like, oh yeah, my brain knows I can do it, so I'm just gonna do it. Whereas like with work, I don't have grit. Like if I don't like it, I'm just not gonna do it. And I'm just gonna be like, nah, I just didn't want to do it because don't have the grit to do it. And that's the
Yeah.
problem, I think.
So this is a semi-philosophical question, Brian. Let me just ask you this then, right? Because again, I feel like I've been putting words in your mouth a little bit too much. So, do you think there's value in having grit and doing something you hate?
I think there's value in having grit. And if you have to do something you hate in order to develop it, then there is value in it. But is is that a fair answer?
What if you could have had grit doing something that you loved?
Oh, well then, yeah, obviously I wouldn't like yeah, no, then no. Yeah, yeah.
Right? I mean, this seems like it's in some sense, it's a almost asininely simple kind of conversation to have, and yet I think that's the answer then to what you said before. They develop grit, yeah, but I think in many of these instances, it's if it's just more of the same and it's not, I got grit now. Now let's kind of reorient the ship and go somewhere where we want to go.
Yeah.
If it's just grit for pain's sake, I'm actually increasingly of the opinion that this may all be for nothing then, right? You may have developed a skill
I think
to
it's a good
just make
survival skill,
to,
right?
it's a good survival skill, but I think in the end it still eats at your soul, right? And at that point it's not grit. It's like pain tolerance for a slow death, right? In some sense.
Yeah, I guess what I keep thinking about is like I can not do like 2 hours of work that I don't want to do. Like I just don't do it. Whereas like back in the day, people used to go to war, right? Like they have infinitely more grit than I have when it comes to doing stuff that you don't want to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, war is a particularly complicated example to kind of monkey wrench in here, though, right? So war has there are many things that like will come into someone's mind. I think, right? And I'm not a guy who's gone to war, but like even as I understand it intellectually, it's a different thing because when you're in a war situation, you're really bonded actually with the other people that you're in the unit with. Like you really do care about each other, ironically, right? It's one of the very few positive things of being in a terrible, life-threatening, miserable situation with a group of people, right? Where cooperation is absolutely necessary for survival, right?
Yeah.
So what happens? People who might normally have turned on each other or been real self suddenly, they're willing to die for each other and they care about it. Like you see a lot of things. And I remember this quote. I don't watch a lot of like documentaries about wars or anything like this, but I remember a long time ago, I did watch one, and it was the grandson of a guy who had fought, I think, in World War II. And the guy was, talking to his grandpa. He was relaying the story afterwards, right? And he was saying, like, wasn't war like horrible? He said, yeah, it was, but actually, the one really like amazing thing about the experience was that it was the only time in his life where he had experienced unconditional love from the
Huh.
people around him, right? I was like, so my first reaction was like, that's effing crazy. But then when I think about it, I'm like, I could kind of see that because we don't usually do that, right? The true vulnerability, the true like, my life's in your hands, yours in mine. We're gonna do this together, and like, I
Hmm.
really do care. Like, and if we have someone on the unit die, like, it's gonna break our hearts. Like, we don't actually normally see and operate that way, right, in
Yeah.
life. And so I thought that was such an interesting thing to say about what normally we would think of as a horrible experience,
Hmm.
right? And all this, but yeah, right. So there's also this. So this is we're digressing, right? Because this is why I think war is a very complicated thing. Because even if I hate what we're doing and I think that it's pointless, for example, which probably many of the soldiers did, they probably came to the conclusion it was senseless in many ways. Many of them did. Where they found the meaning and what drove their motivation, because they didn't suddenly check out and get lazy, right? Was exactly this kind of bonding that started the community that started to come
Hmm.
together for them. So that's why I don't know that it's actually a great example for you to necessarily contrast yourself with like, well, war was real grit. Yeah, but war also gave everyday people something to die for, right? And a lot of reasons to care and a lot of other things
Oh, so you
that
think that was like a sense of purpose at that time?
yeah. Yeah, I
Huh.
think it emerges from the severity and the extreme nature of the situation, um, which is frankly unreasonable to expect in a company or in our normal day-to-day lives when our lives are not being threatened, frankly,
Yeah.
right? So that particular contrast I think is a little unfair. I think, Brian, if you were in the same circumstances, you would develop many of the same things, but for the same reasons, right? So
Gotcha.
it's not a like, well, you did so much more than me. It was like, well, they also had different things going on that would push them in that direction, right?
Yeah.
So, but going back to this question of grit and doing something for its own sake if it's painful, I have mixed feelings about it because I definitely don't want to say that, first sign of you not liking something, bolt, right? It depends what it is, right?
Yeah.
And people often conflate these words with like if we're just talking about like a hard task, like what, for example, you and running. right? There's a reason why you want to, a positive reason why you want to develop that in athletics, for example. So in that context, it makes sense. Working a job that you hate for 25 years, at some point on that trajectory, it doesn't, I would argue, make sense. So the principle is not universal, right? It really depends on the situation that we're talking about. Um, and that's why I say like, okay, well, that second category of things, well, let's say that that's not grit has a purpose for a certain period of time, and beyond that, if it's not steering you in a different direction, it has gone from a useful skill and ability and tolerance to just like making a very slow, painful death
Yeah.
more possible, right? Which is not good.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
I guess what's popping in my head is like, I guess you doing this research and work and around like creating something to help people find what like they should be doing is timely, especially if we're arriving shortly at a world where like there's going to be this reorganization of like human capital caused by AI. Like,
Yeah. And part of the reason why is that compared to boring routine jobs, right? And that's kind of an unfair characterization, but I'm going to make it unfair. So, boring routine jobs describes many or which are fairly repetitive. Creativity, you cannot hate your job and be a great creative most of the time,
yeah,
right? From what we know.
yeah,
Like you need to like get energy from the create like you need to sort of like it on some level or find value in it. So the mindset has to be different too. I think purpose will matter a lot more. Like, could you imagine like someone creating an animated cartoon or like a video or like writing a book who just hated every minute of it and then they created something amazing, right? I think these things creating these things can be quite painful, but there's a certain kind of purpose or kind of joy doing it as well. But if you take that part out and it's just pain,
yeah,
um, I don't know that the product turns out as well.
yeah. No, I doubt it would. Yeah,
Yeah. So you're right. It is timely in that way, even though no one's thinking about this at the moment.
yeah.